Hey everyone, it's M82 and today we're back with a little bit of a special video. And by special, I mean I spent like 4 hours just flight testing this just to get you guys the results. So as some of you who have been paying attention to the Flyout server may know, we're doing a 10-gallon challenge. The challenge is pretty simple. Get as far as you can on just 10 gallons of fuel. Now with such an open-ended challenge, you know people can be rather creative with how they get to these ranges. If anyone is wondering, every other week on the Flyout server, Flyout being the game I'm playing right now, we do a build challenge. If you guys like this one, we can do many more videos on them in the future. Also, if you guys want to participate or observe these challenges, feel free to join the Flyout official Discord server. Excuse me. As usual, I'll leave a link to that in the description below. If you'd rather discuss these challenges with me, feel free to join my server too. It's also in the description below. Of course, I'm still addicted to self-promotion. So this challenge started as the 10-gallon challenge, but since different fuels had different densities, we settled on 20 kilograms of fuel instead, which I think is fair. But after this video, I'm going to be converting it back to gallons and multiplying it to 10, that way we can find out the actual range of these vehicles and what they may be. Of course, that's assuming 100 octane aviation fuel, at least for my own vehicle, maybe not for everyone else's craft. By the way, I didn't mention that, but there's actually a bunch of other people building craft too, and maybe I'll show them off at the end of the video. If not, I'll at least show you pictures of them. But that's enough about the challenge's actual goals. Let's talk about what we'll need to do to complete the challenge. So obviously your number one primary focus on getting an aircraft as fuel efficient as possible is weight. You'll see many gliders, for example, employ materials such as carbon fiber in design in order to make it as light as physically possible. At the moment in Flyout, there isn't exactly a way to do material design. In order to simulate the weights of different materials, however, we can edit the actual thickness of the fuselage skin, therefore modifying the weight. Also in Flyout, reducing the thickness of the wings will significantly reduce the weight of their construction. Don't make it too thin though, because of course no chord means you don't get as much lift. For a secondary goal, reducing drag and streamlining the aircraft as much as possible is also essential in increasing efficiency. Due to the low speed nature of these aircraft, this isn't quite as important as some of the other factors. What is important, however, is optimizing your lift in comparison to your drag. My craft at the end ended up having a lot of drag because I wanted to make it feel more like a real aircraft would instead of an aircraft that's just purely focused on gliding and efficiency. So that's kind of on me, but anyways, let's get on with it. Commonly referred to as the lift-drag ratio, this number is the highest mark of an aerodynamic efficiency on an aircraft. Achieving a lift-to-drag ratio minimum of 20:1 is essential for making a good plane for this challenge. But that's not it. In real life, as well as Flyout, extra lift and distance can be achieved from wind. For example, if you fly on the side of the mountain where the wind is blowing into it, the air gets pushed up due to, the fact that there's a mountain in the way. In gliding, this is commonly referred to as ridge lift and is one of the few ways to gain energy as an engineless vehicle. Similarly, when rays from the sun hit the ground, it is heated up. In some areas, the ground becomes hotter than others. You can tell if you're in one of those hotter areas below you based on the formation of cumulus clouds or just a terrain that absorbs more sunlight, such as a town or a plowed field or something. But as the ground heats up, so does the air. And as some of you may know, hotter air becomes a little bit more spread out and therefore reduces in density. Much like a ship on the ocean, the less dense air rises above the colder, denser air around it. In weather, this hotter air rising is referred to as a thermal. For a glider pilot, it means a free ticket to a higher energy state and a higher altitude. You can kind of see that stuff in real life too. If you ever see a vulture or an eagle circle one spot over and over while barely ever flapping their wings, that's because they are riding a smaller one of these thermal updrafts. It's incredible how nature figures this stuff out. Anyways, ridge lift and thermal updrafts are modeled in Flyout so we can use them. By looking for newly forming cumulus clouds or flying upwind from a mountain range, you can generate lift on your own. I'll have to keep this in mind for my flight. Although, we're talking about all this cool weather stuff, honestly, I'm not going to use 90% of it. You know why? Because I have to fly more or less in a straight line point A to point B, cross country. That way I can show you guys how far this aircraft can truly go without, you know, any of that weather nonsense being a factor. Obviously, other than consistent wind conditions and weather conditions, we don't want to try and more or less cheat this challenge, right? We just want to go straight from point A to point B to show you guys how efficient this aircraft can be. It's not a glider pilot challenge, it's an engineering challenge. Also, as you guys may know, I'm not the only one completing this challenge. I'll be sure to include at least everyone else's at the time's build in a brief cinematic at the end of the video. Alright, now you guys actually get to see what I was doing. I decided to, of course, make this glider a single fuselage piece and make it shorter, almost like a tadpole shape. I actually ended up calling this thing the tadpole because of it, but that was simply so I could get as lightweight as possible with my construction, and, you know, hopefully as aerodynamically efficient. I gave it an engine that was actually outside the aircraft. I don't know if you guys saw there, but basically you can see like the timing belt, the throttle body, and of course the cylinder heads kind of just, and exhaust, just literally sticking out the back there because I needed cooling and I figured that was the best way to do it. Although realistically in Flyout you don't need to do this for cooling, I just thought it was a good idea. Also, I ended up adding a very small liquid cooling system to the aircraft anyways, so it didn't actually matter, and all it was really doing was increasing my drag. But like I said, I wasn't here to make this challenge as far as possible because in many cases I'd feel like I was cheating if I did. So I ended up keeping it that way, and you know, the extra drag is okay because you'd still need extra drag in real life to simulate at least an air scoop or some way of cooling the engine. And then of course I added a small little pusher prop at the end of the tail. I had a T-tail and I had truss braced box wings down to the landing gear pod, and then past that was just a high aspect wing. This thing at the moment doesn't really feel like an ultra efficient vehicle. It feels more like a cheap vehicle, like something that maybe a person could buy for a small amount of money as compared to some of the other designs which are more like ultra expensive, high altitude, high range tests. Which is again my fault. I guess I'm not really following the challenge 100% as it should be followed. At least for my first test flight. I actually end up doing 2 test flights, one where I modify this vehicle and try and make it as long range as possible. Now that test, that one is more like one of those official vehicles. So I'll tell you, this actually gives me an awesome opportunity because now I can tell you both the results at the end of the video, and I didn't end up recording the ultra long range one because that probably would have taken like 7 or 8 hours, and I'm really lazy. So instead I just recorded part of it and then recorded all of the first flight tests so that way I can compare them. Well, at least that'll keep this video hopefully under 30 minutes. I mean, I don't know at this current point in time of this recording, so I guess we'll see how long this video is going to be. But you know what, there's so much to talk about that I don't mind having a little bit of a longer video for this one. Also, for my regulars here, something a bit unusual about the formatting of this video is that the cinematic will actually be at the end. I want to show you guys the raw tests and actually talk about the science behind these aircraft for a little bit before we get to the cinematic. Especially since it's going to include other people's vehicles. Anyways, at this point in time we had our landing gear in place, our engine supports fully mounted, and our electronics in the aircraft. We were going to start on the interior soon, however I was a little bit disappointed in how heavy the retractable landing gear were. I would have preferred to go with fixed landing gear, but I decided that the aerodynamic benefit may have been worth it. At the end, ultimately, this was actually a bad decision, and I probably would have been better off going for fixed landing gear. And that's what I actually changed for my other version, is that it was meant to fly a little bit slower than this one, and that one did in fact have fixed landing gear. Pilot and all, this one weighed about 800 pounds, whereas my final ultra efficient variant weighed about 600 pounds. But hey, you know what? For once you guys actually get to see me do cockpit building, how about that? And for once I'm not actually being incredibly lazy for this one. I actually make a lot of the parts for myself instead of just going with this stupid 6-pack and calling it a day like I did on that Heli RV video. Sorry about that one, guys. I don't know, I feel like I'm getting a little bit of a creativity block in Flyout right now, and it's making it difficult to come up with new things. It may be best if I take a break from the game for a little bit after this. But hey, for anyone watching right now, if you have any game recommendations, feel free to pop it in the comments below. I'll probably at least play a few of them on Twitch, which is also in the description, so feel free to check that out if you're interested in seeing anything else from me. And no, that doesn't mean I'm gonna stop playing Flyout, that just means I'm probably taking a break for a few days. Now here, in this point in the video, you guys do see me come up on a ridge lift. Basically, the wind is blowing into the mountains, and because of that, as it gets pushed over the mountains, it's an updraft, and that's exactly what's happening on my plane. This is a fantastic way to gain altitude. And it's probably our best bet for getting as far as possible on this thing. But of course, I don't really optimally take any of these ridge lifts because I'm not really concerned about, you know, gliders. Also, by the way, now's the time to mention that I swear to God this flight drove me insane. Because, I don't know, it's just incredibly boring. Like, the most exciting part of the flight is at the end when I get a really good ridge lift off of a mountain. It was because it was a really tall mountain. It was like 7,000 meters tall or so. So for us Americans, that's like, that's really tall. That's like a mile shorter than Mount Everest, for example. They were really tall mountain ranges, like reminiscent in height to the Himalayas. And you know what? Just flying through that mountain range was literally the most exciting part of the 4 hours I spent doing this. There is a lot of time in this video where it's just absolutely nothing's going on. And for that, I have other people to talk to, and I'm just doing other things at the time mostly. But I still have to check back every once in a while to make sure I don't die. So that's also why it's at 30 times speed right now, because this would be, I don't even know, it would just be incredibly boring to sit through, I don't know, 4 hours of flight footage where nothing's happening. I mean, maybe I can put like some synth pop beats in the background and upload it to YouTube. Hyper efficient synthwave beats to study/relax to. But that's about it. But now we are coming up on the longest leg of the journey here, and that's because there's this little peninsula by the ocean that I'm flying down, and I'm basically just flying straight down it for several hours. Or not several hours, but like, I don't know, 20-30 minutes. It sure felt like hours though. Also, I gotta say, what's incredible about watching the game at this speed is you can literally, like, see how the weather evolves and the clouds move and how dynamic it all is compared to the wind and all that. Every once in a while, I don't know how well you can see it because it's just for flash seconds mostly, but I hit F3 and that brings me into Aerodynamics view. And, you know, every once in a while, I don't know how well you guys can see it because it's only for, like, split seconds, especially at this speed, but, I hit F3 and that brings up an aerodynamic overlay view for Flyout. Basically, there's little green pins, that's the lift, there's little red pins, that's the drag, and then there's there's this very large blue pin in the middle of the aircraft, and that is essentially where the wind's blowing. You can see whenever I go over like a really strong ridge lift, for example, that blue pin goes near vertical, just straight up, which is pretty fantastic, and it makes you feel pretty cool. For one of the ridge lifts at, on my next flight, I actually literally just cut the engine and gain almost a full 2 kilometers of altitude. It's pretty insane. Unfortunately, I was not able to catch the formation of any cumulus clouds on this flight, so I couldn't really ride any thermals. Plus, at the point of this video, it's probably too high to ride the thermals anyway, so there's that. You know, I was thinking about it. I only have like 4 or 5 different music files for when I'm like building and testing stuff, and it's time-lapsed. Before I finish making this video, I better get some more music files because I don't want you guys listening to the same 3 jazz tracks over and over again while I'm doing this. And I think that's a pretty official mark that I'm starting to run out of things to talk about now. I'm sure I'll think of them as time goes on. Actually, you know what? That's something. It's pretty incredible when you're watching this flight footage. It's almost like you forget that it's just 10 gallons of fuel. It's not even 10 gallons of fuel. Like, adjusted for 100 octane aviation fuel, it's only like 7 or 8 gallons of fuel. I think it's 7. I should probably do the math on that before I make myself look like an idiot. Okay, yeah, I just looked it up. It is actually 6.6 or... It's like about 6.5 gallons of fuel we're doing this on. Like, here in America, that's like, what? That's $20 worth of fuel? That's just insane. That's $20 worth of fuel, and whoa, we've traveled like over 400 kilometers on it at this point. Now, I know you guys in Europe don't measure in gallons, and since the density of fuel... Is fuel lighter or heavier than water? You know, whatever. I know that it's about, like, just shy of 4 liters per gallon. So that's like, what, like, just above 20 liters? That's 20 liters of fuel, and we're traveling, like, 500. At the end here, we're getting even higher. We've only burned through maybe, like, 15 or 10 of those liters, and we've traveled over 400 kilometers. That's just absurd. And people say planes aren't efficient. And, you know, that's actually something else. A lot of people say, like, airplanes are very inefficient, but if you actually, like, look up the miles per gallon per passenger, or, you know, kilometers per liter per passenger, however you might measure it, they're actually pretty efficient. The only planes that aren't that efficient, really, in the aviation world and in the perspective of saving the environment would be private jets. So, like, the things that very high-class people fly around, like the Gulfstream 500. The reason why they're so inefficient is because they hog down a bunch of fuel, and then they're only carrying, like, 4 or 5 people at best. So if you're actually talking about carbon footprint and all that, then the actual average plane isn't that much of a problem. Although that's not to say it isn't a problem. I mean, if you compare how many flights go up per day of the average plane, it's a bit insane. So the actual carbon dioxide produced by that is probably pretty high. But we're not here to talk about environmentalism, we're here to talk about aviation. So let's try to stay on topic. So essentially at this point we're nearly out of fuel, and we are now going to make our descent to the ground. I'll be honest, I could probably make this descent to the ground a lot more efficient than it ends up being. But, I don't, because I'm tired and I'm done with the flight. Also because I was doing other things in the background instead of actually paying attention to my aircraft and its flight control. So, we ended up touching down a little bit harder than we could have. And, you know, basically we go into a near vertical descent twice. Simply because I wanted to, you know, lose my speed a little bit quicker. Not only because I was impatient, but also because there was a really nice valley that I wanted to land in. I mean, you see it, but it's a really nice valley, and I wanted to get the coordinates of it so that way I could make an airfield here and fly some planes through it at some point in time. Yeah, that's a thing you can do at Flyout, by the way. You can make a custom airfield in a text document in the game's local files. And, you know, you can have an airfield wherever you want, so that's fantastic. Anyways, now we are on to the next iteration of the aircraft. After that really long flight, I found out I was actually pretty unhappy with some things about the aircraft. First of all, I made the cord of the wing a little bit too thin and wasn't generating enough lift. Second of all, there was a lot left to be desired about the airframe in general. Also, the interior could definitely use some work. It was just the way it was shaped was really bothering me, so I ended up redoing it a little bit. Also, naturally, I mean, I like the planes a lot, so it makes sense, but I ended up making it a twin boom, because of course I ended up making it a twin boom. Also, through fixed landing gear and a shorter fuselage and a bunch of changes, I was able to make it a lot lighter. I was also able to make the prop a little bit more efficient by decreasing blade chord and increasing blade length. This is because the tips were nowhere near subsonic, so I'd still be getting an efficiency bonus by increasing the length. And of course that also means that we end up repainting it, and we made the paint a little bit better too. But as you can see also, it has much higher aspect wings now, and the wings are much longer. The last aircraft we flew had a lift drag of about 18, and when I was done with this one I had a lift drag of about like 23, so that's a pretty significant improvement. Honestly, if I had put the engine inside the vehicle, or maybe not done the antennas on the vehicle, or, you know, tried to keep it very aerodynamically streamlined, I probably would have been able to achieve even higher. I'm thinking maybe 25. But, I didn't. Because I was stupid, and I I basically decided I wanted it to be a more practical vehicle rather than sheerly accomplishing the goal. Because I think that's a problem with a lot of modern aerospace designs, is that they're all, like all those concept vehicles that are like, oh, look at this hyper-efficient concept vehicle, and then it's designed to accomplish exactly one goal, and then it's hyper impractical for literally anything that isn't that goal, so all it would ever be in real life is some glorified test vehicle, and it probably wouldn't even be that. So the renderings, I don't know, I just find renderings that are like ultra efficient in exactly one category and then completely impractical in every other to just be stupid. They're pointless. So I decided to make mine actually a practical aircraft. Sorry everyone watching, I guess I won't be the most efficient here. Actually, you know what, 5 minutes before I started recording this anyways, there was a dude who uploaded a vehicle that went even further than mine. So, after that first test, our results were about 700 kilometers distance. After the second test here, we got to about 850 kilometers, at least calculated. I believe the guy, it was Mr. Chips on the server, and he got to like 1,000 kilometers, so you can definitely make it further, but you know what? 850 kilometers is nothing to complain about. But, I mean, here's the flight here. Here's how it flies. It flies a lot lower speed, and it climbs a lot faster than the aircraft I had just had. And also, I included a turbocharger with a very low manifold pressure limit. That way the aircraft could fly at a lot higher altitude with ease, and I think that helped me out a lot because our cruising altitude was now around 20,000 feet instead of about 15,000 or 10,000 with this earlier model. So if you do the math and you go to actually 10 gallons of aviation fuel instead of 6.5, that means that it's pretty well attainable to go well over 1,000 kilometers with just 10 gallons of fuel. Actually, just saying, it was like 1,300 kilometers. It was just shy of 1,000 miles. 1,000 miles on 10 gallons of fuel. Well, there you have it, folks. It's about 1,000 miles on 10 gallons of fuel, apparently. Hope you folks enjoyed, and see you in the next one. Now enjoy the compilation, and feel free to give anyone in the Flyout community a nice shout out for their awesome builds. Thank you, and goodbye. Well, unfortunately, I'm gonna have to cut the cinematic there because there's only been technically two uploads at this point in time, so, you know, I guess there's not much I can do there. That's alright, though. Well, the journey to 1,000 miles on 10 gallons was pretty fun. I hope you guys enjoyed it as much as I did. I can't wait to see you all in the next one. For now, though, I am probably going to take a step away from Flyout for a few days. Give myself a little bit of a creative break. Until then, guys, I hope to see you then. Goodbye.